Welcome to Bookish and Beyond, where nonfiction comes to life. In each episode, we break down the world's most impactful books, from self-help to biographies. We dive into key takeaways, author insights, and modern parallels. Want more? Subscribers get exclusive access to our book summary, study guide, and timeline PDF, everything you need to go deeper. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Let's explore the books that change the way we think. This is Bookish and Beyond.
All right, so get ready because we're going deep on knowledge today, like seriously deep.
Yeah.
You know, you sent us this YouTube video with clips from Imam Al-Ghazali's The Book of Knowledge.
Right.
And we're going to kind of unpack what he's saying about like why knowledge is so important in Islam.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll even get into how it's considered like even more important than worship, you know, like even martyrdom.
Yeah, that's right. It's it might sound kind of surprising at first, but Al-Ghazali, he really lays out like a strong argument for why knowledge has this power to like totally transform you.
And there's this whole other thing about hidden knowledge too. It's almost like a secret treasure or something that we're going to try to uncover. And then there's this story about this guy who, well, let's just say he didn't exactly use his knowledge the right way. And there were some pretty intense consequences.
Yeah, it really gets at this idea that knowledge is power, you know? And like any power, it can be used for good or for bad.
Right.
And Al-Ghazali, he talks about that responsibility a lot.
Okay, so to understand this, like this whole idea of knowledge being so important,
Yeah.
let's go back to the basics.
Okay.
The Quran, I know it's full of verses about knowledge.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's like woven through the whole text. You see it everywhere. For example, in Quran 28.80, it says that to really understand the afterlife, you need knowledge. And then in 29.43, it emphasizes that Allah's parables, you can only really get them if you have knowledge.
So it's like right from the start, the Quran is saying that knowledge is the key to unlocking a deeper understanding of your faith.
All right. And it's not just about understanding. It's also about action.
Okay.
So like Quran 4.83, it connects knowledge with understanding Allah's will and what we're supposed to do.
That makes sense. It's like if you don't understand the why behind what you're doing, then how can it be truly meaningful?
Exactly. Right? And there are all these beautiful metaphors, too, about knowledge. Like in Quran 7.26, it compares knowledge to clothing and truth to adornment. And then the raiment of piety is compared to modesty. So it's like this picture of knowledge as something that covers us and beautifies us and leads us to righteousness.
I love that imagery.
Yeah.
It's like knowledge is this like protective layer, this beautiful garment that adorns us and guides us on the right path.
Yeah.
It's so much more than just facts and figures. It actually like shapes who we are.
Exactly. And don't forget the Quran itself is a source of knowledge too.
Right.
Quran 7.52 tells us that this book explains everything in detail. And in 29.49, knowledge is described as a clear sign that's present in the hearts of believers.
So if the Quran is a source of knowledge and knowledge is this transformative force that leads to piety, then you can see why it's so central to Islam. It's not just like an option, it's fundamental.
Exactly, and that's just the Quran.
Right.
When we look at the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the hadith, we see this emphasis on knowledge, like even more.
Okay, so what are some of the sayings that really stand out that show us how important knowledge is in Islam?
There are so many, but one that really captures it is, when Allah loves someone, He grants him knowledge of religion and guides him to the straight path.
Wow.
So there's a direct link between divine love and knowledge.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah.
It makes you think like, if you want to get closer to God, knowledge is the way to do it. It's not just about blind faith, it's about understanding.
Right. And the prophet also said, the learned are the heirs of the prophets.
Okay.
So this puts the learned in a really special position in Islam. They inherit the legacy of the prophets, the people who brought God's message.
Wow, that's a big responsibility, carrying on that legacy.
Yeah.
But why are the learned held in such high regard?
Yeah.
What's so special about them?
Well, there's a saying that helps explain that all that is in the heavens and on earth intercedes for the learned.
So you're saying like the whole creation is praying for you.
Imagine that. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've established that knowledge is a big deal in Islam, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around this idea that it's even more important than acts of worship and martyrdom.
Right.
How is that possible?
It's a fascinating concept, right?
Yeah.
But it makes sense if you think about knowledge as the foundation for everything else.
Okay.
It's like you can't build a house without a solid foundation.
Right.
And similarly, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said no one worships Allah better than a person with knowledge of religion.
So you're saying that without understanding, without that knowledge, acts of worship can just become empty rituals.
Yeah.
Like you're just going through the motions, but you're not really connecting with what they mean.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even the most Savite person needs knowledge to guide them to light their way. Imagine someone striving in the cause of Allah, putting their life on the line.
Yeah.
They still need guidance from those who have knowledge.
Okay, I get it now.
Yeah.
It's like knowledge is the blueprint, the guiding light that gives meaning and direction to everything we do.
Exactly. And it's not just about knowing the rules and rituals. Right.
But understanding the deeper why behind them, that's where the distinction between outward knowledge and inward knowledge comes in.
Yeah, you're right. I've heard those terms before. Can you explain what that means? I feel like we're going beyond just the basics now.
Yeah, absolutely. So think of outward knowledge as focusing on the legal rulings and the external practices of Islam. It's like a doctor who treats the symptoms of an illness.
Okay.
Inward knowledge is about purifying the heart, understanding God's attributes, and navigating the spiritual world. It's like the physician who's looking for the root cause of the illness.
So outward knowledge is the what, and inward knowledge is the why.
Exactly.
Like you can know all the rules of a game, but inward knowledge is understanding the spirit of the game, the deeper meaning behind it.
Exactly. And while both types of knowledge are important, our source really emphasizes that inward knowledge is superior. It's what brings you closer to Allah, to a deeper understanding of your faith and your purpose. Wow, I'm starting to see how this all fits together.
Yeah.
We've got this foundation of knowledge from the Quran and Hadith, and this idea that knowledge is actually more important than worship and martyrdom because it gives our actions meaning.
Yeah.
And now we have these two types of knowledge, outward focusing on the rules and inward all about the heart.
Right.
So what about this hidden knowledge you talked about before? It sounds kind of mystical. What is it exactly, and how do you even find it?
Yeah, hidden knowledge, that's where it gets really interesting. It's like this deep, almost like you just know it kind of understanding of God's attributes and the realities of the afterlife.
Okay.
And all the little details of the spiritual path. It's not something you just read in a book or argue about.
That makes it sound even more valuable.
Yeah.
If you can't just read about it, then how do you discover it?
You find it by truly seeking God and purifying your heart and through deep thinking.
So it's more about like living the faith than just studying it.
Yeah.
Like the difference between reading about how to swim and actually jumping in the water?
Exactly. Think about it like the precious jewel or the hidden pearl that they use to describe Abu Bakr's faith.
Okay.
It's something you can't see, but it's super valuable.
I think I'm starting to get it. But with all this talk about knowledge being so important, is it like an obligation in Islam to seek it out?
Al-Ghazali actually talks about that. He says there are two types of knowledge that are obligatory. The first is individual obligation, meaning there are certain things that every Muslim is expected to know no matter what anyone else knows.
So like the basics.
Exactly. The essentials that everyone needs, like understanding the declaration of faith, knowing how to pray, knowing about fasting during Ramadan.
Right, the basic stuff.
Yeah, the core principles.
Okay, that makes sense. You need a foundation before you can build anything. What's the other type of obligation?
It's called communal obligation, or fard kifaya in Arabic.
Yeah.
This is knowledge that's necessary for the community as a whole, but not every single person needs to be an expert on it.
So like, for example, we need doctors and scientists and engineers.
Yeah.
Those roles are essential, but not everyone needs to be a doctor.
Exactly. It's about having people in the community who can fill those roles so everyone benefits.
That's like a well-functioning ecosystem.
Yeah.
You need all those different parts to have a thriving community. But, you know, Al-Ghazali also talks about the dangers of knowledge.
Yeah.
Right? Like not just misusing it.
Right.
But are there types of knowledge that are just bad in themselves?
Yeah, he does. He's really critical of knowledge that leads to arrogance and endless arguing.
Right.
And just being obsessed with worldly stuff. He sees that as like a twisted kind of a corruption of its true purpose.
That makes me think of the story you mentioned before about that guy who misused his knowledge.
Yeah.
What happened there?
This story is a great example of what Al-Ghazali is talking about. It's about this man who served Moses, peace be upon him. and he was always bragging about how much he knew. But his heart wasn't pure.
Oh.
He ended up using his knowledge to get rich and famous, and it all led to his downfall.
So it wasn't the knowledge itself that was bad. It was his intentions.
Right.
The way he used it.
Exactly.
It's like he let his ego take over.
Yeah. It's a cautionary tale about why it's so important to seek knowledge for the right reasons, to get closer to God and to help others, not to boost your ego or get power for yourself.
Right.
Al-Ghazali makes it clear that those who misuse knowledge face some serious consequences.
It makes you think about how much knowledge there is in the world today and how easily it could be used to manipulate people. It's like a reminder to always question where information comes from and our own reasons for wanting to know it.
Absolutely. And to be aware of what kind of knowledge we're going after.
Okay.
Al-Ghazali warns against getting lost in all those tiny legal details or getting caught up in debates that don't really matter or using knowledge just to show off.
Right.
It's all about seeking knowledge that brings you closer to God, not further away.
Yeah, that's so relevant today with everyone constantly throwing information and opinions at us. It's easy to get lost in those arguments.
It is.
And lose sight of the bigger picture.
It's a trap that's easy to fall into. Al-Ghazali's reminding us to step back and think about why we're seeking knowledge in the first place.
Right.
Is it to draw closer to God, to become better people, to make the world a better place?
Right.
Or is it to feed our egos and win arguments and get recognition?
That's a really good question to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
So with all these warnings about the dangers of knowledge, how can we seek it out in a way that's actually good for us? What advice does Al-Ghazali give us?
He outlines several duties for both the student and the teacher. For the student, he emphasizes sincerity of intention.
Okay.
You have to be seeking knowledge for the right reasons to please God, to benefit yourself and others, not for fame or personal gain.
Right. That goes back to what we were saying before about having pure intentions.
Exactly.
It's not just about what you know, it's why you want to know it.
Yeah, and he also stresses humility. A true student approaches their teacher with respect, knowing they have something valuable to offer.
Right.
They're open to learning and being guided, and they're willing to admit when they don't know something.
It's about having that open mind, that willingness to be wrong.
Yeah.
To learn from others and not letting your ego get in the way.
Right. It's recognizing that learning never ends, and we're all students in a way.
Right.
He also advises students to be selective in what they study.
Okay.
And focus on the most beneficial knowledge first.
So prioritize the knowledge that's really going to impact your life, your relationship with God, your character.
Exactly.
Don't get caught up in all these complicated arguments before you've learned the basics.
Yes. And he warns against jumping between different areas of knowledge without mastering one first.
Okay.
You know, focus on one path, really understand it, and then move on.
Right. It's like that saying, jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah.
It's better to be really good at one thing than to know a little bit about a lot of things.
Exactly. He compares it to like conquering a city.
Okay.
You wouldn't attack from every side at the same time. You'd focus your forces and take one strategic point at a time.
I love that analogy. It makes so much sense. Be strategic about your learning. Focus your energy where it'll have the biggest impact. But isn't it all pointless if you don't actually use what you learn?
That's where his last piece of advice for the student comes in.
Okay.
He says it's super important to put knowledge into practice. It's not enough to just know a lot of stuff. You have to live it.
Right.
Embody it.
Yeah.
Let it change you.
Knowledge without action is like a seed that never grows. It has all that potential, but it never bears fruit.
That's a great way to put it. So we've talked about the student, but what about the teacher?
Yeah.
Al-Ghazali has a lot to say about their role, too.
All right, let's hear it. What are the key things a teacher should be doing?
Well, first, just like the student, the teacher needs to have pure intentions. They should be teaching to help their students get closer to God, not to get famous or a bunch of followers.
It's about being a guide, a mentor.
Right?
Not some kind of celebrity guru.
Exactly.
It's about helping people understand, not building up your own platform.
Right. And they should be teaching from a place of real knowledge and understanding, not just repeating things they've memorized.
Yeah.
They need to embody the knowledge themselves, not just talk about it.
It's like that whole walk the walk thing, right?
Yeah.
Students can spot a fake a mile away.
Absolutely. And just like the student, a teacher should be humble. They need to be willing to say, I don't know,
Yeah.
and avoid being arrogant or showing off how much they know.
Yeah.
It's about creating a space where students feel safe to ask questions and explore ideas without feeling judged.
I bet that could be tough sometimes, especially when you're the expert.
Yeah.
But building that trust is so important.
It is. A good teacher is patient and understanding. They meet their students where they're at and adjust how they teach based on that.
Right. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly. It's like being a gardener.
Yep.
You have to take care of each plant based on what it needs.
I like that. You're not just throwing information at people. You're really thinking about the best way to help them understand.
Yeah, he compares a good teacher to a skilled doctor.
Okay.
Who figures out what the patient needs and gives them the right treatment.
I love that analogy.
And finally, a teacher should encourage their students to put their knowledge into action.
Right.
They should emphasize that it's important to act, to let knowledge transform your life and spread outwards.
It's about inspiring students to not just learn, but to actually do something, to become better people, to be active in their own growth and in making the world better.
That's the ultimate goal, to help students use knowledge to change themselves and make a positive impact.
So we've talked about seeking knowledge for the right reasons, the different types of knowledge, the duties of a student and a teacher.
Right.
But what about the intellect itself?
Yeah.
Al-Ghazali really gets into like the details of what it is and how it works, doesn't he?
He does. And it gets really interesting. He actually identifies 4 different ways to understand the intellect.
4. Okay, I'm listening. This sounds like some deep philosophical stuff.
First, there's the natural intellect, which is basically our built-in ability to reason and understand.
Yep.
It's what separates us from animals.
Our ability to think abstractly and make connections and solve problems. It's that consciousness that lets us engage with the world in a meaningful way.
Exactly. It's our God-given ability to understand the world around us. Then he talks about acquired intellect, which is the knowledge we get through learning and experience.
So this is where education comes, in exposure to new ideas, personal experiences.
Right.
It's building on that natural foundation we're born with.
It's the process of expanding and refining our understanding by constantly learning. Then he gets into what he calls practical intellect, which is the ability to actually use knowledge in real-life situations.
So it's about problem solving and making good decisions and navigating life, using the knowledge and experience you've gained.
Exactly. It's the ability to take what you know in theory and put it into practice.
So this is where knowledge becomes wisdom, right?
Yeah.
It's not just knowing stuff, it's knowing how to use it.
Exactly. And finally, he talks about refined intellect, which is the highest level.
Okay, what does that look like?
This is where someone develops deep insight and they can see things coming. They're able to control their impulses, make wise choices, and act with purpose. Their actions are guided by wisdom and good character, not by fleeting desires or knee-jerk reactions.
So it's like you've mastered your own mind. You're not just reacting to the world around you. You're choosing your path based on a deep understanding of yourself and the world.
Exactly. And Al-Ghazali emphasizes that all 4 of these forms of intellect are connected.
Okay.
The natural intellect is the base. The acquired intellect builds on that. The practical intellect puts it into action. And the refined intellect is the final result of all 3.
It's like a ladder. Each step takes you higher towards better understanding and wisdom.
Exactly. It's a journey of intellectual and spiritual development. It takes effort and dedication. And a constant push to refine our understanding and make sure our actions line up with what we know.
Al-Ghazali really gives us a complete picture of knowledge.
He does.
From where it comes from to how we use it in real life. From the dangers to the amazing power it has. It's inspiring and a little bit intimidating all at the same time.
Yeah, he does. And he leaves us with a lot to think about. How are we using our intellects? What kind of knowledge are we seeking? Are we letting it guide our actions and shape who we are? Are we trying to embody the qualities of those who truly understand and live by knowledge?
Those are some really good questions to think about.
Yeah.
And, you know, talking about people who really live by knowledge.
Yeah.
Al-Ghazali talks about the learned men of the hereafter. Who are these guys and what makes them so special?
This is where all those ideas we've been talking about come together. These are the people who truly get what Islamic knowledge is all about.
Okay.
They're not just scholars or intellectuals.
All right.
They're living examples of faith, wisdom, and virtue. They actually walk the walk.
So they don't just learn stuff for the sake of knowing it. They make it a part of their whole lives.
Exactly. Their main focus is on the hereafter. They know this world is temporary, and they focus on doing things that'll benefit them in the eternal realm. They're not attached to possessions or status or any of that stuff. Their hearts are set on something much bigger.
Their priorities are straight. They're in it for the long game, focused on what really matters.
And their knowledge shows in how they act. They're humble, patient, kind, sincere. They don't just talk about these virtues, they actually live them.
No hypocrisy there.
Yeah.
They're the real deal.
Yeah, it's like that saying, actions speak louder than words.
Right.
And they never stop growing. They're constantly working on themselves, purifying their hearts, fighting their bad habits, and building good ones.
So they understand that true knowledge isn't just about collecting information. It's about changing from within.
Yeah.
A constant effort to make yourself better and purer.
Exactly. And they avoid those pointless arguments and debates. They just focus on finding the truths, living by it. They see knowledge as a way to guide people, not as a weapon to use against them.
It's about bringing people together, not pushing them apart.
Right.
Using knowledge to connect with people, to show them the way to create understanding.
Well said. And they're careful about giving opinions. They only speak when they're absolutely sure about the Islamic teachings. And they're not afraid to admit when they don't know something. Their knowledge comes from a place of humility, not arrogance.
You know, it seems like humility keeps coming up when we talk about true knowledge. It's like the more you know, the more you realize how much you don't know.
That's a really interesting point. True knowledge makes you humble, not arrogant. And finally, these learned men of the hereafter, they have a deep connection with God. They work on that inner relationship through constant remembrance, reflection, and devotion.
It's about being aware of that connection with God, knowing that God is present in every part of life.
Yeah, that's it. They're like that saying, knowledge is a light that Allah places in the heart.
Wow, that's beautiful. It reminds us that true knowledge isn't just about your brain. It's about a change in your soul.
It is. And that's what Al-Ghazali is trying to show us, to become not just learned, but truly wise. To let knowledge light up our hearts and change our lives in a way that brings us closer to God and helps everyone.
This has been an amazing journey. We've covered so much from the Quran and Hadith to the different types of knowledge, the dangers of using it wrong, the qualities of a good student and teacher, the nature of the intellect, and finally, this inspiring image of the learned man of the hereafter.
Yeah, it's been a really deep and interesting exploration. Al-Ghazali's ideas about knowledge, they're timeless. You know, they offer guidance for anyone who wants to understand more and live a life with more meaning.
That's true. It reminds us that the search for knowledge never ends. It's a path that requires honesty, humility, and always striving to be better.
And it's worth it. The rewards of true knowledge in this life and the next are beyond measure.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into Imam Al-Ghazali's The Book of Knowledge. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. Remember, true knowledge isn't just about filling your head with facts. It's about changing your heart, becoming a better person, and using what you know to make the world a better place. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey. And until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep growing.